All right, so we're going to discuss the pros and cons of using a high-pass filter on sources that have low base information. So I'm going to start by playing this 2-track here. This is a printed mix print, so it's not a master. It's just a mix print. Haha, just kidding. I'm going to change the buffer on the playback engine, and then I'm going to play it. I would say that this is not particularly subby or bassy. I would say it's got a nice bass to it. But if I flip over to my mains, so there's some deep sub in there. Its primary bass is a little lacking, but deep sub is a little heavy. So this might be a case where I might consider putting on a high pass filter in order to clean up some of the sub information. So let's say I put it on at 30 hertz. So let's check this out on a meter here. So right now all I've got is a little bit of bass boost going on, and then on a completely different plugin I've got just everything bypassed, but we have a meter here. Okay, so we're coming up here in that close to -10 area. Now I'm going to put on the high pass filter. And it looks like we've lowered the total amplitude here by a total of maybe about 1.5 dB. So if we're looking to be able to make the record louder, the high pass filter is certainly working here. Now let's listen just subjectively to whether or not we're hearing any trade-offs. I don't really hear too much difference between one and the other. I feel like I get a little bit more definition on the kick, ever so slightly, but otherwise I don't feel like I'm necessarily losing anything. So to answer the first part of this question, are high-pass filters good and bad, we can certainly see a case where here we're using a high-pass filter and it's doing exactly what we hope to do. Now, is there another way we could go about it? Probably. We could pull down a shelf from a similar corner frequency and use a more gradual roll off here and see if we can get a similar result and see how that sounds. Right, so pretty similar. The only difference I'm really hearing here is that I'm not getting quite as much of that distinct definition of the kick, but I feel like I'm retaining a little bit more enunciation on the sub. So overall, do I have a preference? I would say I would probably mess around with the shelf filter here, but both of these I think are doing the job that it's intending to do just fine, and we're not getting any additional peak information. Now, in the video that I watched that Enrico showed me, the gentleman suggested that when you do lose headroom by putting on a high-pass filter, which is extremely counterintuitive, it's random and has nothing to do with phase shift. So I want to dissect that real quick. I'm going to now pull up a limiter, and I'm going to push this limiter with makeup gain, pulling the level back down pretty hard. So you can see I'm squaring it off pretty well. We hear some audible distortion, right? So that's pretty heavily limited. So let's pull this back in, and now let's play this. Our meter is pretty pegged here to like -26, something like that. Let's turn on the high pass filter. So we just lost about 5 dB of room, right? As soon as I pulled that in, we bumped from around -26 to about -20 on the meter, right? Now, I think this should clearly dispel the fact that it's random, right? I did something very specific knowing that the result would be this. Why is it not random? Well, because it directly correlates to the other thing that it supposedly isn't, which is phase shift. What is happening here in the filter? The filter is changing the group time progressively with frequency. The lower we go beneath the filter, the more shift we are going to get in the lower frequencies. So if you picture our corner frequency here, if that's time neutral, the lower and lower we go, the more forward in time those frequencies start getting pushed, or, well, delayed in time those frequencies start being. So in other words, 20 hertz was originally coming in at the same time as 50 hertz, right? That's time neutral. Now, 20 hertz is coming in later than 50 hertz. That means when those frequencies add together, they are going to form a different composite wave shape. And that different composite wave shape is going to have a transient spike where one no longer existed. Phase shift is in fact the cause of the loss of our headroom. So it is phase shift, and it's not random. This will happen when we have highly compressed sources. The more compressed the source is, the more we're going to see a transient difference in the end result. There are other things that will correspond to it as well. The exact corner frequency will make a difference, and the steepness of the filter will make a difference. So if I mess around with this for a while, I could probably get more or less of that shift, but we are going to get that shift. Almost 100% of the time, I don't think that there's any example where you wouldn't, unless there just was no information down there. Now, here's one where I don't know the answer. Is our shelf going to produce different results? Let's find out. It produces a similar effect in that we lose a little bit of headroom. However, we haven't lost quite as much. I think that, again, this is a result where both of these are doing a similar performance, but we have a little bit more control over the exact way that we want to shape our low shelf. So overall, I think that the low shelf is a more useful tool. But yeah, that's what happens when you cause phase shift to highly compressed material. You get a different composite waveform. So we've unraveled that mystery, but what do I know?